Whatever you're currently doing, I can assure you that today's episode is going to captivate you. I exclusively sat down with the grandfather, the inventor of the barcode, like the barcode, the barcode that you see on every single product that you shop for. And we had a conversation about how the barcode came to be, how they sold it, how they put it in the public domain, and we're just going to dig in. So, um, leave everything you're doing and stick around. Hey, welcome to this episode of the podcast with me, Pierre Subeh. This podcast has no affiliation with everything that I do with Entrepreneur Magazine, my affiliation with Forbes 30 Under 30, my investments, the companies and projects I'm involved with. This is completely separate and it's for entertainment purposes only. So I'm required to say that it's not for educational purposes, but it kind of is. Just don't take anything I say seriously and fact check me, but don't hold me on it because this is not National Geographic. This is not Netflix. We're just having fun and we're exploring the world together. We're asking these questions. Today's episode obviously means so much to me because we're starting something new that I've always wanted to do. Hold on a second. Let me put my phone on Do Not Disturb. Oh, I thought I did this. So today's episode is really important to me because it's the start of something new. I think it's really important for everyone, including yourself, to always ask questions. And for me, I'm really curious about a lot of different things. And I have the privilege of being able to speak to some really cool people. And so we're working on putting this together for you in this format. And today we are talking about something that both you and I touched this week. And no, it's not what you think. We're speaking barcodes. You see, barcodes surround us everywhere, not only in the supermarkets, but everywhere. They're in grocery stores, they're on Mars, they're in the deepest point on Earth, they're everywhere. And I remember barcodes for as far as I've lived. Like, I remember barcodes since forever. They're such an important part of our lives, yet we somehow, and by the way, barcodes by nature are kind of ugly in the sense of, they're just black and white strips. But they've become such an incredible technology that they just faded. Like, we don't even recognize them anymore. As we would have recognized them if they were just born today. But the cool thing about barcodes is that my personal story with them, I loved barcodes as a child. My dad, to this day, is like in the grocery world. He has like these small, how do you call that? Not a deli, but he has these small grocery stores, bodega, I think. I don't know. Anyways, he's in that business, and my first job was actually one of my first jobs. I was just like 13, and it wasn't a job because I was told to. It was a job because I wanted to. But I would go in and I would help him with a lot of packaging, unboxing, filling the fridges. But point of the story is I was fascinated by barcodes and I always wanted to know how they work. So one of the things I purchased when I was really young is a barcode scanner. And I would just love to scan them for fun. I just couldn't understand how we don't have at the time, and this was only like 2012, how we don't have amazing cameras that can autofocus, true autofocus, how we don't have amazing phones, but yet somehow we magically have this scanner that's not that expensive. You can point it in any angle at any time of the day, and it would somehow just scan a barcode. Like, that idea to me was so bizarre in so many ways. I can't even explain it to you. The cool thing about it is, how does it work and why did it exist for so many years? So anyways, I went into this like crazy research hole, um, rabbit hole, and we did all this research and I was able to have a conversation with like the father inventor of the barcode. And you know how whenever something is invented, everyone claims to have invented it, blah, blah, blah. there's so many names that you'll see for like different technologies that who actually invented it, but this person was the person that really put in all the work, put in the teams together, dedicated a big part of his career to this, and he knows secrets that he exclusively told me in our interview that you'll see later. Basically, you're telling me, like, when we look at the barcode, you led the team that invented the barcode, like the actual barcode.
That's correct.
Wow. It's so game changing. I'll tell you why. Um, I grew up my entire life, and my father owned grocery stores. I think I was like 14. I made him purchase a barcode scanner for me, and it was USB, so I'd connect it to my computer, and I would scan random things, and it wouldn't really input into any software because it was just making the sound and scanning. And I found so much joy in that. I can't explain it to you. It's like what people now feel when they try AI and all these technologies that are new to them. To me, that was to this day the most magical moment when I could just scan something and it would just make that beeping sound. I really had a fascination with it. And I had a fascination because I couldn't understand it. I had a fascination because we grew up in a Caribbean island called Curacao. And small grocery stores don't necessarily have all the technology to use a POS system. This is a really personal story for me because I've had fascination with barcodes and I've seen them in action. And one of the very first things I want to ask you is, did you know what it was going to do to the world, or did it just feel like another thing that you're developing as a product? Did you know? Did you feel that it's going to change the entire world we live in?
Yeah, I think at the point in time where we got selected as the international standard, then we began to feel, oh God, my God, this is really going to hit. Before that, we were worried, were we going to be able to make it work? I mean, we could make it work, but could we implement it? I mean, could we get it printed on all the merchandise? I mean, and what about the error rates and so on and so forth? There, there was a code that was selected before, that was not selected, but that was invented before ours, the bullseye code,
Yes.
and but it took up a lot of space, and it was easy to scan because you didn't have to orient it to pull it across the check stand. Whereas the bars, you don't have to do that either, but that's trickier with bars because if you have concentric circles, then one line of a scanner is all you need, and it'll eventually go through the middle, and it doesn't matter how it's oriented, it'll be the same. But in an inexpensive printer like your small grocery store that you talked about, or at the beginning, all grocery stores for the first 5 years, all grocery stores, you had to have an inexpensive, cheap little printer. And the printer, for example, would often have too much ink in it or too little ink. If it had too much ink, the bars would be too fat and the spaces then became much slower.
What I truly wanted to know is, why did we need to invent the barcode? So what I didn't know at first is that one of the first original barcodes was actually like a circular barcode of some sort, which actually in theory sounds really good. It's almost like a QR code, but it's in a circle way. So it was designed that you can scan it from any angle and it would work. The problem is, when barcodes were originally invented, they were supposed to help society by being able to identify something, right? I think the true purpose of a barcode is to identify something quickly. You have thousands of products, you have tens of thousands of products in a grocery store, and you need to identify it right away at any setting, at any day, time of the day, and stuff like that. So a circular barcode was one of the first inventions. I'll see if we can throw one here. But the problem is, the first barcode printers, or the first printers or whatever, their ink would leak a lot. And what that means is one small leakage in ink would ruin that whole barcode. Whereas the barcode that we know and love today was invented in a way, after so many different trials and errors, even if it leaks at the end, or even if one part of the line has leaked ink of some sort, it would still scan somewhere else, right? Because the way the barcode is formulated or designed is that even if a part of it is missing or ruined or damaged, you can still scan it. Because in order for a scanner to pick up the identification from a barcode, let's say this is a barcode, we don't need every single line to be scanned. We just need one thin line measuring the distance between each line and the width of each line to therefore give us a number. So when a scanner is scanning a barcode, it picks up a number that then is the identifier in the database. Does that make sense? Is that too complicated? Wait, I need a little break. So today I'm drinking chamomile tea, brought by my favorite mug by Alfacher, an adult only brand. So really cool people, love them. Let's take a little quick sip. 1 second. Back to the early days of your career. Give me the year, give me the place, and just let me know how was it that it led up for us to create the barcode.
I actually joined IBM in an organization, and I think it was the picking of the organization that really. I joined IBM in 1960, and it was the Advanced Systems Development Division, and it was a division that was in between research and development. Development was, hundreds of millions of dollars, and research was a small fraction of that. And this was a small fraction of research, but it was an organization that was asked to look into applications of computers, which IBM was selling at the time, that would add a lot of opportunity for sales of more machines, but that just needed one or two things that were missing in order to fill in the opportunity to create that application, to make that application work. And so in the next 9 years, and I'll jump through that very quickly, the next 9 years, I worked on all different kinds of technologies where we were looking for that kind of thing. Primarily for me at the beginning, it was scanning. I did scanning of micro images on very, very small surfaces like the head of a pin for the CIA, and yet big scanning for General Motors, for automobile engineering drawings, and so on and so forth, and other things related to the human machine interface. And then 9 years later, I was sitting in my office one day, and an executive walked in and said, "Hey, we would like you to pick out and start us in some new business, something we're not doing now. We don't want to go into oil exploration. That's too different. And we don't want to shoot our own children. So you can't just redo another computer, but something peripheral to the computer industry." And I think I got that opportunity perhaps because I was going to the Stanford Grad School of Business at the time, majoring in marketing and so on and so forth. And that was unique. And the other thing is that the president and CEO of IBM at the time, a guy named Frank Carey, he's a very famous guy from the past, it couldn't keep its growth rate going at the same percentage with just computers. Computers weren't big enough, he felt at the time. And so he said to his guys, go buy a bunch of companies in Silicon Valley. And they said, no, 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 Frank, you don't seem to understand. Anybody you buy in Silicon Valley in the way of a small startup, they're all going to quit the next morning because they don't want white shirts and red ties and blue suits and black wingtip shoes and all that. And so he said, okay, well, I guess you're right. So then find somebody in IBM and paint a red line around them and let them operate differently, more like a startup. And that was what they proposed to me. And I was very fortunate to get that opportunity. And so I looked at, well, first of all, I got a team. I got a young fellow who was very good at marketing and also had a good engineering background, and an experienced, much more experienced than I, a 25-year experienced IBM engineer who knew about everything from engineering to manufacturing and so on. And so we looked at different opportunities. We looked at banking. We looked at things like that. We ended up in point of sale. And we picked point of sale because uh, there was a lot of information around about it. The industry themselves were languishing about the slow checkout lines and the problem of price marking and price remarking and so on. If you remember when you went shopping in those days, you had to reach to the back of the shelf to find a Campbell soup can, or if you did, you're liable to
Right.
get it cheaper because it had the oldest price on it, and they were losing money at that. And reordering was a big problem, as supermarkets were often out of it, didn't have the right orders in. And IBM knew a lot about this because we had the backroom computers in most of the big supermarkets of the day, in the Kroger and the Safeway and so on, and also in retail, in Macy's and Emporium, and so on and so forth. So he said, would you like to do this as a startup? And I said, yeah, that's a great thing. So that's how I got started, and we took off. And one of the reasons I was very familiar with NCR, National Cash Register, that they had 95% of the market. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, went to school there in the shadow of National Cash Register's headquarters, and there's almost 10,000 employees. And, for 100 years before that, they had cash registers, big old cast iron cash registers that, you punched on a whole array keyboard, and they had 6 printers in them, and they weighed hundreds and hundreds of pounds, but they weren't very adaptable. And that's what people were using in retailing. And in some supermarkets, they were actually just using simple little adding machines. And we thought, gee, if we could build a real little computer, this was a decade and a half before the PC. If we could build a little itty bitty computer, put it on a check stand, and if we had some scanner, and as I said, I'd been working on scanners for years, that could read it, read some kind of an item identification thing, then we could solve a lot of these problems.
Okay, back to the barcode. So the invention of the barcode was really interesting because I went in thinking this is going to be an incredible invention that has, it's science and it's technology and it's early 1900s. Actually, let's get the exact date. I literally did the interview, but I'm not a historian, so let's do a quick Google search. So the barcode was invented in 1952. So okay, 1952, post World War II, was a time when we obviously needed to identify things. So during my interview with Paul, for his upcoming book, The Barcode: How a Team Created One of the World's Most Ubiquitous, whatever that word is, technologies. The crazy thing that I was really, taken back by is that it wasn't just about the technology, and it wasn't just about like, hey, let's create something that's going to change the world. They had to spend a ton of time to convince Microsoft to even fund their research and the team that Paul put together. Then they had to play this game of making it look like they made progress even when they didn't. And what that basically means is they had to make it look like, like we're going somewhere. But they needed to do that to get more funding to actually get somewhere. So it's a really, really funky game. But basically, they wanted, how do you come up with a camera that's able to read a code, again, at any angle, any lighting, any time of the day? Paul told me that they basically had to use laser. The funny thing about the timing of this invention is that it was post World War II, when lasers were known to, take down planes from the sky. So, and like cancerous and blah, blah, blah. So they had to work a lot to actually get the invention to become what it is. And then they worked really hard to convince people to actually use barcodes and use barcode scanners. Imagine making an incredible iPhone 18 that's able to scan, do a 3D print of a face. Or imagine the iPhone 18, you can take a picture of your dog and then 3D print that picture. I don't know if that's really technologically advanced, but let's imagine it is. And then instead of just being like, hey guys, buy this phone, it's let's convince people to buy this phone because they're scared to buy this phone. Well, that's how it was for the barcode.
And then 14 different companies were trying to invent codes for the Supermarket Institute. And at the final meeting, actually, an executive of the company that was hired by the Supermarket Institute to pick the code, McKinsey, the big consulting company of the time, they came out and told me that they didn't think that the people in the selection committee could pick our code because IBM was too big, strong company, big blue. They'd be frowned upon socially, politically if they picked their code and so on. And I said, you know what? My team has come up with two little improvements to the code. I'll tell you about them. And even though I didn't have the authority to do this from IBM at the time, I figured, well, they'll go along with it. I said, I'll give you those and you can say you created your own code and we won't claim the rights to those two ideas. And he said, well, I don't know, but I'll try that idea. He turned around, walked back in the room. He came out about 2 hours later and said they bought it. And so if you read, and it's in a copy of it in my book, the original issue of Business Week that described the selection of the code. It showed pictures of all the 7 finalist codes and our code, and you can see it's the same as the one they picked. And they said they didn't pick the IBM code, but they picked this one, and it's exactly the same as our code with one itty bitty little difference that the scanner can't even tell. And so everything we had working back at the ranch already worked. We were all set to go, and it was a complete success. And IBM loved it. They didn't fire me for giving away that little thing, because you understand the whole thing was put in the public domain.
I mean, people didn't want to just randomly put that technology in their daily lives. So Paul had to do that, and then after they were going to actually like sell it to the National Organization Association of Retail, he even had to do further work to convince them that, like, you know what, you guys don't want the barcode to be a private invention. Okay, we will even go to the extent of putting it into the public domain. So we're not going to even take credit for inventing the barcode, just so that it can be so easy to implement that no one company owns it. And it makes sense. You know, when something is in the public domain, the world adapts it quicker. When something is an invention, then there's all these copycats that ruin the technology because now there's all these million barcodes that are not as good. And then we're all competing against each other instead of actually advancing the world. So that's what inventors truly want. Long story short, they were able to get the barcode into the world and into the public domain, meaning the inventors of the barcode never actually got real credit for inventing it, and they never got paid for inventing it. Because you have to remember that at the time, and even today, but let's say at the time, they worked under these massive companies that would pay them salaries and bonuses and stuff like that. So if you're inventing something in the new iPhone, the iPhone 18, your name is not really on the patent. And even if it is, that doesn't really give you like a stake at every time that technology is used. So that was really shocking to me, because I thought that, Paul is a millionaire, billionaire. Maybe he is, but not from inventing the barcode. In fact, I asked him if he's rich. Let's go to that clip.
My producers wrote a script, but I don't want to follow that script because I think we're going somewhere way better than that. I want to ask you, did the barcode make you rich? Are you rich because of the barcode?
No, absolutely not. I never got a dime for it. I mean, the only thing I got for it was I got promoted in IBM and I got to higher positions and so on and so forth. So that was all nice. Nobody ever made a dime on the barcode from a patent point of view or anything like that, because the Supermarket Institute, they had the idea they needed this item identification, but they realized, they didn't know 10 billion, but they knew this is more than 50 years ago. They knew that it was going to be ubiquitous, and they didn't want to make somebody richer than the Bill Gates of the time, and so on and so forth. And so they said, either put it in the public domain or don't submit it. So one or two had patents on it, but the patents had expired, so they didn't matter. And we published everything. It's public. It has complete rights to the code. Nobody got a dime extra for the code. But of course, IBM, as I mentioned, NCR had 95% of the business worldwide in check stands before we started. And about 5-7 years later, maybe 8 or 9 years later, IBM had the great majority of the percentage, and NCR had pittance. And the size of their company went way down. So and that was because we had produced an entire system that integrated other computer capabilities such as communications and file recording and automatic inventory management and marketing, all kinds of marketing tricks and everything into a system. So it was a major system. So it started out just item identification and so on, but it became a major system. And how that works. You look at Amazon today, and Jeff Bezos is the guy who really made out because, how many scans are there of every item that you order from Amazon? It has to scan something just to decide what line to go down to, what box to go in, and so on and so forth.
Does it make you happy to see what happened with the world and its adaptation of the barcode, or does it make you angry? What do you feel?
No. It makes me very happy. I kind of figured out growing up that one of the real opportunities of life as an engineer is to have a positive effect on society in some fashion, just maybe even a little bit, make some people happy and so on and so forth. And I just happen to be lucky enough to be working on one that went viral, I guess, as they would say. But I mean,
Yes, viral.
it's all over the world and it's everywhere. And yeah, it's really great. And I do the shopping for the family, and I go to the supermarket, and sometimes I use the self checkout, do all the little scanning and so on and so forth. And yeah, I feel really good about it. I think it is an opportunity when you do something that, if you can see how it does affect positively other people's lives.
If you would to start over again and do it now, and the barcode didn't exist, with all honesty, would you take that idea and go somewhere else and take a team and make a startup? Would you stay at IBM? How do you think today people should approach an idea? Because it's very political. Everything you said is very political. I mean, it's always, it's not just the invention. It's everyone wants to make money off of it, and everyone
Oh
wants
yeah,
to own it.
yeah. Well, I'll answer your question in one way. I think the way IBM was at the time, I think it's a different company today, but the way it was at the time, and I haven't been associated with the company since 1984, so that's a long time. But the way it was at the time, I think it was very unique. An interesting comment about that is that I had a friend, a person who I had known at the time, wasn't really close to him, named Bob Miller, and he wrote a quote for me for the back of the book, and he read the book, and he said that it hit him that the way IBM operated at that particular point in time, and the way that I fit into it and was able to manage my way around it to the different levels and so on of management, of sales, of engineering, of manufacturing, uh, and even politics. Uh, it was a real story for how to make a success out of a new startup kind of thing, like a startup inside a big business. And I think that, and he thought that the fact that I was in IBM, it might have been the best way possible for the thing to become a success. I mean, I put together a story, and I went to IBM. I asked him for $600,000, $300,000 the first year, $1 million the second year, and $3 million the third year. And don't bother me in between. And that's kind of what they did. And those are not big numbers in terms of starting them in a new business. And the first I hired 6 engineers, and 2 in communications. One was very good with data management and with coding and so on and so forth. I was a scanning guy, and so on. And that was all we needed. And it was amazing. I had a guy come to my office, to review the project, and he had just been appointed president of IBM. I'm sorry, president of the division I was in of IBM, and he was a big, tough guy, and people were, they shook when he walked around, not because he was so heavy, which he was, but because he was so tough. And he came down and he said, he came in our laboratory, and we had the scanner set up in there in a check stand. Or we were just starting to build it, and he said, "Wait a minute now. You're going to grab a pack of cigarettes with a barcode on it, or a little box of Wrigley's gum or something, and you're going to pull it across the check stand at 100 inches a second, which is very fast, fast as your hand can move. And you might be spinning it, and it might be off the check stand an inch or two. So depth of focus is a big problem. And you're going to then send that image back. You're going to decode it. You're going to send it back to a computer. You're going to look up the price, the item, all that kind of stuff. You're going to change the inventory. You're going to send it back to this check stand and print out, on a register tape, what it was that was bought, what the price of it was, and you're going to do that for 10 check stands. Doing it can tell. He said, that's the most preposterous idea I've ever heard. And he said, but you guys have a good reputation, and I'm going to go away for a year, because I know if I reviewed this thing regularly, I'd kill it. I won't touch you for 1 year. I won't do anything for 1 year, but I'm coming back here in a year, and it better work, or your desk is going to be in the parking lot.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh.
He
The
left.
pressure.
Yeah, he left. And he came back 1 year to the date. He didn't miss it by even a day. And he walked in, and we had a item there, and he threw it across the check stand as fast as he could, spinning, and it read it. And he just looked around, he rolled his eyes. And then he got down on his hands and knees and opened up the box underneath it to see if we didn't have some skinny little engineer folded up in there, putting the answer. And he was kidding, of course. And he said, well, I'll be. And then, I can't repeat the rest of it. And that was it. We made it. And, I don't know how many places will let you do that. They go away for a
Right.
year, and we had it working. And so, and after that, I mean, he was extremely supportive, very, very supportive. So, I mean, we had lots of other problems of a political and social nature, taking the price off items, putting a laser in the scanner, which is how we read the thing, with, people were afraid of lasers. They were using them to shoot down airplanes, as some senator said. And he introduced legislation into the government that we couldn't use them in supermarkets because they were shooting airplanes down with them. He didn't understand the difference between a little one and a big one, and so on.
Wow. Wow. So basically, the challenges, I mean, there were plenty of challenges, as in any new invention, any sort of change. Society is always afraid of change. That's what I'm realizing. We're afraid of what we don't know. We're afraid of anything that feels new,
Yes,
until
so true.
somehow it becomes a daily part of our lives, right? So now,
Right.
I was reading about your upcoming book, which we'll talk about in a second, and the foreword basically said, when a technology becomes so good, we don't even realize it anymore. We don't realize the barcodes. We don't even notice them, because it becomes integrated in our daily lives.
That's
But
right.
that took so many years. So going back again to day one, or day 100, or day 1,000, what was the challenge that you really remember, was personal to you, right? Like, you were more on the scanning side, but what was something that you really to this day remember that people don't know about?
Yeah. Well, one of them on the social side for sure was our first store opening. I sent my very best engineer up to the store open to make sure it would open. It was Giant Foods in Tyson's Corner, Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. And he went there, and he called me first thing. I'm sitting by the phone just waiting, okay. And I said, Alex, is it work? He says, no, they couldn't even open the store. Oh, what? How is that possible? I even had the controller duplexed. Everything was duplexed. He said, well, the pickets are outside. They won't let anybody enter the store. The union is blocking them. And well, because the prices are not going to be on the items, and they still were, but they weren't. They were going to take them off. So that I hadn't expected that, and that
Hmm.
I ended up becoming kind of a a person that is a lobbyist. I had to visit 18 states passed laws against it. I had to go here, there, and everywhere. I remember going to Montana and talking to the committee that was going to decide on it. And frankly, they were very receptive. And when you covered the gory details of the thing, they said, "Okay, we'll recommend that the legislature pass it." It all kind of comes down to a little story in our first test store, which was in Montreal, Quebec. And I went up there and was watching the store operate. This is even before any stores were operating in the United States. It was a test store, so it didn't really count, but they were scanning. And there was an executive from the Canadian government in the store. And he stopped an elderly lady who was walking out of the store with a cane and a bag of groceries. And he said, "Are you really upset that this system is here and the price isn't on the items?" And I could hear the little lady because I was standing right next to her. And she said, "Oh, no. Hey, I really like this because before I never knew what I paid for an item because you just got a slip that just said 59 cents, 39 cents, 29 cents, whatever. And, you didn't know what it was. Everything was just, there were no description of what you had bought. It was just a number is all you got, just the number." And she said, "Now look at this." And she pulled out her checkout slip and it showed, Wheaties, this price and whatever. And she said, "Now I walk down the street and I take my slip and I can compare the price with what the store down the street is charging for the same item. And I get to price shop. I could never do that before. And besides the prices on the, the shelf, and that was
Wow.
good enough for me anyway. And, we never heard any more problems from the Canadian government. But 18 states did pass laws against it in the United States, but they petered out after a year or two. California's law said that if you had a scanner, then you had to put the price on the item, but if you didn't, you didn't. But they wrote the law so that it would expire automatically in a year if nobody objected, and there were no basic objections at the end of a year, so the law just crumbled and fell away. But I didn't expect all of that.
Of course, Paul. Wow, it's so fascinating, and I'll tell you why. It's because me personally, and my generation, I can't imagine living a life where things were different. And I walk into a grocery store. I scan the barcode with my iPhone. It instantly tells me the calories of a product, what it has, its recommendations. I can price compare. I can go on Amazon, scan the barcode, and see if I should get that on Amazon instead. I'm literally in the cockpit of full control as a consumer. And to think back that the challenges were so significantly different that we were even debating implementing in technology is crazy. And I do have to tell you, it's a question actually. Do you think putting it in the public domain of some sort made it that it was for the good of society rather than becoming more like a vaccine where only one company owns it and then it becomes more of a controversial conversation? Do you think the reason why it was so well adapted was because not necessarily one company owned the rights to it and the royalties to it?
Domain. All those things that you said about it are true. Uh, one company wasn't just pushing it. I mean, look at Apple and the iPhone. There are a few knockoffs and so on, but in this case, it's very efficient that there not be knockoffs. It's very efficient that the same code that uh, you scan in China and India and South Africa is the one you scan in the United States, and that it has one number, and people manufacture post serials, can send it everywhere. And uh, now there is of course, if you were a purist, you might say, well, there's a country code on the front of the code. There is, but everything looks the same, and if you're in that country, that's the way your computer works. But the code is the same. And there was an immense amount of work that went into finding out how to put the bars, how to encode the bars, and what the relationship is. And I should mention that the last the appendix in the book, I put a 40-page appendix in the book, which tells for the guru readers that are mathematicians and physicists and engineers and want to get all that story, they can read the appendix, because I wanted the rest of the book to be readable by everybody who isn't, a mathematician doing differential equations. But all of that is in there, and it was very, very important to put that in, and it took a lot of analysis to do it. And that's another reason why it was good that a company like IBM did it. And I had to work pretty hard to get IBM to support all that, knowing they weren't going to get any patent on this thing, and that whatever rights they had to it, they're going to have to share with everybody, and they just have to build the best product if they want to have the most sales. And that's fair, and I think that's good. I think it's wonderful that they did that. And I should mention that the National Retail Merchants Association used our same code, but in magnetic form on a magnetic stripe. And the world has changed now as big stores are dying out and COVID has come and so on and so forth. But a decade ago, if you went to a Macy's store, our code, the exact same code, but it's not visible to your eye because it's magnetic on a little stripe on a piece of paper, just like the one on your credit card. And that's what they scanned, and that's what did all their inventory control, and they were very successful with that for 40 years. And as I said, it's now they're finding that they can do more with just a plain optical barcode, so they're probably, most of them are going back to that. But I do think it was a great thing for society that it wasn't a patent.
If you guys hate ASMR, I apologize. We're keeping these ASMR takes very short. But the point of the story is that that's the barcode. Barcode is really interesting. I hope next time you go to the supermarket and you're looking at it, you really take the time to see what a true miracle it was to create something like this in 1950 something, 1952. Like in that time frame. And how it's been around for so long, and now we use QR codes. And this is not really a conversation about AI and codes. Barcodes are simple, useful, integrated in our daily life, and they're never going to go away. I mean, not anytime soon. We can look at RFID or whatever other ways of scanning that we have, but the goal is an invention has to be simple. It has to work. It has to be reliable. And it has to be in the public domain, supposedly, if you want it to go mainstream. On another note, I would love to speak about, this is so random, but I really want to cover it in today's episode. Can we please cover the crazy thing happening about alien bodies found in Mexico? So like a few days ago, let's pull this up. A few days ago, these scientists had like a Congress hearing of some sort in Mexico, where they went to this hearing and they showcased the skeletons of alien bodies or corpses that they found more than 1,000 years ago. I'll put them somewhere here. And the point of this is, it's really interesting because a lot of people don't know this. I've looked at the research and I've looked at the evidence, and there's a very high chance that this is completely fabricated. Either that person fabricated it or someone fabricated it and sold it to that person, because all of us, I mean, we always chase clout in a way. Even scientists want to be the first to invent something or the first to find out about something. to the extent that we'll do crazy things. And before I go further into why this alien corpse is most likely fake or fabricated, I hope it's not, but I know it is, unfortunately, based on what we know so far. You have to go back to the Fiji mermaid, where back in the 1800s, there was this museum in New York that showcased, this mermaid that was half human, half fish. And at the time, people couldn't travel. There was no cell phones. There was no technology. There was no internet, no spread knowledge to this extent. So a lot of people thought it was a mermaid until it wasn't. It was basically just a random fisherman who sewed half a skeleton of a monkey and then the other half was a fish, and sold it to American fishermen like, oh, this is a mermaid body. So the goal of the story is, we've always done this. We always want to be fascinated. And I don't know if this is how we're going to find alien corpses. And we'll speak about this in future episodes. But basically, the Congress hearing in Mexico was much better than the ones in the U.S. because it wasn't just like, oh, trust me, there's aliens. We know of them, but I can't say anything. It was like, hey, we have proof. Here's the body. And it's really cool because this body was preserved in this white substance that preserves it. And supposedly it's over 1,000 years old, this creature of some sort. A deep analysis of its DNA was run. Not independently, may I add, just by these scientists. And 30% of its DNA, I don't know what's this. 30% of its DNA is actually unknown, meaning that it's not anything we recognize, which could mean that, it's real. It's tridactyl. Its feet and hands are tridactyl, which means that it has like 3 fingers and 3 toes. Interesting. Its skull shape, structure is really interesting. But it's not until we can somehow get independent researchers to do their thing to actually verify if this is real or not. I mean, for all we know, it could be some random scientist of some sort that brought turtle bones, bird bones, and just put it together into what looks like an alien to us. But it could be fabricated. And that's the end of today's episode. So today we've learned about barcodes, their politics. We had an amazing conversation with Paul McEnroe, the father, the inventor of the barcode. I took you back on a trip to 1950 something. And we basically talked about this random alien body corpse that was found in the Congress hearing in Mexico. And with that, I'm going to wrap today's episode. Thank you so much for sticking around. Remember that none of this is factual until proven to be factual. So we just kind of speculated on some of the subjects that were discussed today. You can follow me on Instagram at Pierre Subeh, PIERRESUBEH. And then please try to subscribe or follow to this podcast wherever you're listening to. Don't leave me a review yet because it's too early to give me a true judgment of my work. Let's do this a few more episodes before you leave me a review. And I'll see you soon. Thanks for stopping by. Enjoy your day.
Thanks for watching the podcast by Pierre Subeh. We hope to see you again very soon. For now, remember to feed your chickens.